the model that is not sent by email to this computer.
I know you're just listening, so you're just listening now. You're changing positions here. Okay. Yes, yes. That maybe it's
Maybe the USB might be slightly easier. It might be like
just before you start, 1 minute for me, it's something for tomorrow, so I can tell to the people and
are you coming tomorrow?
I have already been there.
Yeah?
Yes. Nice. It's a very nice place.
Oh, that's good. Okay, you're gonna scare them with the complexity of economy now? But afterwards we have hands-on, right? Afterwards we
yeah, I am going to very quickly all the model inside and after
Chris, I want your phone strategy. How many views do you have?
8 views y la sexualidad es 9.
The desktop.
Let's see if
Or
I
just
can
one
get
for
on the
everyone.
desktop.
Very small.
I was just, I think, working in 3 different ones. Motion, day 5, that's
Yeah, like on the one I was just
No.
like,
You.
yeah, just playing in 3
Yes,
different.
comes
I think,
from yeah.
so I can take down this.
Yeah, you have like you have the different sub-modes, and then in management they really put different views because you can move. Yeah, you can move from one relation to the so it's on 2 different pages. Lewis is one. Yes, go to this one. It seems easier.
Well, yeah, therefore, people.
Oh, that's good.
Yes,
But the time that you were working all the night.
yes, it has a role.
No, but you were working all the time.
Not all the time.
A lot of them.
I was worried tomorrow, so maybe we can wait for
But also the evening.
What time do you finish yesterday?
3:20 or something.
3:20. I think all right. So you stay more time. The last beer.
Yeah, one more. That was fun. Like we went first to this bar, and then we went to like restaurants, and then we went to this place where there's music. There was like music in this castle, like in the afternoon already. There's music outside.
Just very brief.
And there was it was very cool.
Okay, just a very brief, let's say, administrative info for tomorrow. So I send you all an email with tomorrow's schedule, so you know exactly what we are doing, where are we going. So more or less all the info is there. I will just repeat two things. Please be on time, because unfortunately Dubrovnik is a little bit problematic from a transportation point of view regarding buses and so on. The idea was that we start from Mijovic, but it's impossible to go even near to the old city with the tourist buses. There's special fees, So at the end we agreed that we will start from Academis, because most of you are at Academis. But also the problem is that the bus guy said that it's difficult for him to maneuver around there, so he will stop at the public bus station on the main road in front of Academis. So we need to be relatively quick, you know, when he comes, we don't need to jump. We have like 2-3 minutes to enter. It's not that, it doesn't have to be that quick, but it will be very difficult to wait someone for 10 minutes or more, so please try to be on time tomorrow. And another thing, the weather forecast actually is getting better for tomorrow, and it's much better than for today, so hopefully it will stay like this. But I would also urge you, if you have any kind of umbrella, raincoat or whatever, please bring with you, because if the weather is nice, you can leave it in the bus. You know, the bus is only for us, so it's not a problem to take stuff like that with you. Regarding other things, I mean, if you have some questions, of course, for tomorrow, I can answer right away. If not, you can always reply to me with an email if you have something specific you want to know. And that's it. We will have a professional tour guide, so he will do all the info and things that you need to know. So that's it, basically. So see you tomorrow, 9:45 at the latest, and that's it. Okay, perfect. Yeah, you can. Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I'm just going to show you a little bit briefly how the model Lensing looks, how the economic module looks inside Lensing, and I will show you the results of our simulation, and after Guillermo will give the hands-on session. So, well, first, there are some warnings or technical details about the economic module. As you probably know, the William economic module is already still under development. So this means that we do not have so far a basic business as usual scenario. We only have like a by default scenario. We have replicated the real data for 2015, but for the rest of the time series, you more or less remains constant because the drivers of the model are zero. We have to calibrate things. So. What I'm going to show you is more or less the structure of the model, all the submodules that Iñaki explained before, to show you how they look in Lensing, and maybe to highlight some things, some functions that can be useful if you are planning to model something, or maybe for the exercise of we will have after. So, well, all the exogenous inputs are in a view. So we upload here all the exogenous inputs we need. So I guess you don't see anything, but I think Tomislav uploaded the model. Just if you want to follow it, you should have it in a safe folder. But maybe I can put it. Okay, well, here you have the label submodule. For each submodule, we have these switches that are very useful when we are developing the module because it allows us to connect or disconnect each submodule to the rest of the modules. And this is very useful, for example, if you are doing some tests and you detect a mistake and you don't know where it comes from because everything is interconnected. So despite disconnecting each submodule, you can check where the mistake is. So it's very useful in the development test. And here we have the labor productivity and the delayed output real, which is a shadow variable. You know what a shadow variable is, I guess. So it comes from the other view, the view of production. And as Iñaki explained before, with the labor productivity and the output real, we can calculate the hours needed. And with the hours needed and the hours per worker, which are, this is the variable that we are going to change after when we do the policy. We can calculate the employment and also the unemployment, and the unemployment affects wages. In terms that when we have a high unemployment rate, the wages are, when we have a high unemployment rate, the wages are low, because when more people is unemployed, companies used to lower the wages. So here you can see more or less the first feedbacks, since output affects hours and affects employment, and indirectly the wages will affect through prices after the output. So we can here see here some of the feedbacks that Iñaki explained before. As you probably notice, if you look at the model inside, there are very few stocks and flows in the economic model. This is because, as you also probably know, the BC3, which is modeling the economic model first in other software and after we translate into basic. So they do not think in system dynamic terms. They use other modeling methodology, use like econometric dynamic models. You don't call the economic model as a system dynamics model, but we just translate it to basic. So there are a lot of variables that could be converted into stochastic flows, but we have not done it so far to guarantee consistency to programs. I'm trying to explain myself better. For example, you have here the labor productivity that depends on the labor productivity of the previous year and a growth rate. It could be modeled as a stock. For example, the stock would be the labor productivity, and the flow that enters in the stock would be the variation of the labor productivity. It could be a way to model that. But we are doing in another way to guarantee consistency with GAMS, which is the other software that works in discrete time, and Basic works in continuous time, so it's different. We are doing for the moment like this, but for you to know that it should be a stock and a flow, and a lot of variables that follow the same logic, the same. So, very briefly, here we have. Okay. Here we have a calculation of some indicators, such as if there is a delay between my screen and what I'm showing there. Okay. The gross value added and the net value added, and the gross value added real, because we calculate most of the variables are calculated in real terms and in nominal terms, taking into account the prices. We also calculate here the net operating surplus that I explained, and if you click in with in the F3, if you have the model or if you are working with Basic, it's very useful because you can go to the place in which those variables are being used. For example, the net operating surplus is calculated. Sorry, because there is a delay, but I'm clicking in the net operating surplus and then I move to the all the views in which this variable is being used. And also, if we click here in this uses in the bar of the left, you can see also where this variable is being used. Okay, so for example, here is used to it goes after to the taxes to the taxes because we apply taxes on profits, and you can see more or less where all the relationships between variables. Here we calculate also some of the taxes that after we enter in the government part. I know this can be a mess. I explain like this, but just to know for you to have a wide overview the complexity of the model. Here, let's wait for the screen to adapt. Okay, here we have the famous input-output loop, which is more or less the core of the economic module. Here we have the technical coefficient matrix, and we do here the Leontief matrix. We invert here the matrix, and here is the calculated input-output loop. If someone is interested in know more about it in depth, we can discuss it maybe after, because we are only inverting the domestic matrix because benzene sometimes have some problems with operations with more than 2 dimensions variables. So maybe we have to do some tricks for doing some mathematical operations with more than 2 dimensions matrices. And what else? Here we have the Okay, here we have the investment submodule. As I showed you before in the partial version, here we don't have implemented the damages, but the logic is more or less the same. Based on the output real, which comes from the output module, we calculate the output real expected, the capital stock of the equilibrium or desired capital stock, and then we calculate the investment and so on. And here we have the government submodule. Here, as you can see, the right part of the view is related to the revenue, and the part of the left is related to expenditure. And in the middle, we calculate the deficit or surplus that after is accumulated in the stock of the government. Okay. Here you can see a lot of shadow variables that comes from many places of the model. So if you are interested, it's very interesting to see it with more time and see where all the connection between the models. And here this can be more difficult and less didactic, but here we have the consumption submodule, in which based on income and wealth, we calculate the consumption of the different goods categories, and after these three last views, households, investment and government, are the endogenous demand that after enter in the input-output pages. And finally, we have here the prices that depend on almost everything. Here you can see the linkages we have so far with the minerals submodule, because most of the linkages with other modules are still under development, but here we already have the prices that comes from the minerals submodule, and that affects the prices of the mining sector in the economy model. Okay, so this is more or less a wide view of the model, and I would like to show you preliminary results of a simulation by applying a policy. As you can see here in pink, we have modeled some policies that works in the following way. For example, for the hours per worker, we have implemented different ways of applying this policy. We put here with this variable we put the year in which we want the policy starts. For example, by default is 2025, okay? So from 2025, we can determine that the hours per worker, which are in more of the European countries, I think, now are 40 hours per week. Now here we calculate the hours per year. But we can say, okay, from 2050 onwards, the hours per worker will increase, for example, 1% each year. And we can make these hours per worker to evolve linearly, okay? And also we can implement this policy in two ways. We can make that all the regions and all the sectors evolve in the same way, or we can say that different regions and sectors evolve in different ways, which would be much more realistic. For example, maybe these policies are only applied in some European regions, but not in other regions, so it's maybe more realistic. I'm going to show you some simulation. Well, William takes a lot of time to simulate now because it's very weak, but it's very heavy. But I have run some simulations already, so I'm going to show you some preliminary results. Well, what I have done is to, you can see, for example, for Spain and the sector manufactured plastic, I have three scenarios. The red one is the baseline with no policy applies. The blue one is with an increase of the hours per worker. In the green line would be like the post-growth typical policy, which means that we reduce linearly the hours per worker, okay, from 2025 until 2015. So, what are the effects of this policy? Well, first of all, we have not implemented the effect of prices. Prices now are disconnected by this switch because we are having still problems with that. So we are not capturing all the effects of this policy. Only some of them. I'm going to show you what we have captured. Okay, what are the effects on employment? When we increase the working hours, we have less employment. And when we reduce the working hours, the employment grows, because if all of us work less, we can hire a lot more people, right? So the effect on the unemployment is the opposite. As you can see, when we reduce the working hours, the employment is reduced. And depending on the unemployment rate and the equilibrium unemployment rate, which is endogenous, we have one or another effect on wages. For example, here we see that a working time reduction policy could imply an increase in wages for this sector and this country. It's interesting. So,
Why? Where does this effect come from?
Because if the unemployment decreases, there are more people interested in working, some companies increase the wages. So this is the opposite. If unemployment rate increase, okay, the others. So, well, we are not capturing the effects on prices, as I said, because it's disconnected, but the logic effect would be that if wages are increases, prices will increase as well. So, right? So, it would kill demand, okay? So the demand would decrease, okay? But we are not capturing that. So, what are we capturing, which is interesting? The labor compensation, which is the amount of wages of all the workers, is already growing in the working time reduction scenario. So it affects the disposable income of the workers. One moment. those technical issues. But the labor compensation, as you can more or less see here, the labor compensation is part of the disposable income of workers. So if you have more wages, you can consume more, without considering that effect of price that could have the opposite effect in this model, but we are not capturing it already. So the final effect, for example, on GDP, which is a variable that is like a reference for see the effects of policies, would be the following. One moment. So, as you can see here, the effects, well, as you are going to see now, the effects are not very big, but you can see a more or less difference between a difference between the scenarios. So in the working time reduction scenario, we can see a little bit of growth in contrast of the other scenarios because of these policy. And that's what we have calculated until now. What do you think? Do you have any question? Or?
Opinions, but we have
Sorry?
No, I think it's very interesting because
Okay, yes, it's very preliminary, but we can see that applying one or another policy, we can, all the effects are spread by the whole of the model, and we can see other variables if you are interested to see what the effects are.
you have a question. You said you don't have prices, so real equals nominal GDP here, right?
This is real GDP.
Yes, but if you don't have prices?
The real GDP and nominal GDP, I guess, are the same in this version, yes, because we really don't have prices.
So don't you just have inflation there? When you have growth, it's just an increase in wages that does not affect prices, or you have a fake effect? So.
Yeah, you are affecting wages, and your labor cost compensation is higher, your income is higher, right? And your demand is higher, and your production is higher.
Which explains the false result that working time reduction
yes,
growth.
Yes,
just creates inflation.
Without prices, I don't know what would be the final effect with the consideration of prices, but yes, of course, you wouldn't grow at that. And that's
Still question and out of the scope of the project, but have you calculated how much do we have to reduce the work hours in the aim of achieving employment?
not
Yes.
so far.
In your scenario, until 2050, you achieve full employment.
Yes.
Can you go back to the other one?
Yes, in that sense, you can do it.
2050.
Yeah, it depends
Under the assumption.
under the assumptions.
Yes.
Yes, and we are also we are not calculating we are not taking into account, neither the effect of population. Now population is constant. In labor productivity. So this is a very specific scenario without considering a lot of things. So we cannot say that we are showing you consistent results, but yes, we can see here that you reach more or less zero rate of unemployment for 2050 in this scenario for the
And in that simulation, can you see the final energy demand?
The final energy demand? No.
It's not linked in that scenario.
Sorry?
It's not linked the economic model to
The energy module? No, not so far. No, this is only the economic module working. So everything goes there. There's no benzene in there in that computer, so if you want to use yours or mine,
I thought it was meant.
I think no.
Can I use yours?
Yes.
Let's use
Do you have the mod? You received the email from this morning. Do you have the model?
No, but I have it.
Okay.
Just
So guys, Before we start, everyone received a few emails from Tomislav with a PDF file called Sim Model, and another one this morning which has a dancing file called Model Class, something like that. So we are going to have a look on this together. I will try to explain a bit the logic of the model. The objective is to present a much simplified economic model so that we can work in the hands-on section, so we don't have some policies. So I'll try to describe a bit how the model works. And I will ask you guys, maybe in groups or 2 or 3 people, to develop some policies that you believe that can help to save this economy from getting high increasing temperature and excess of emissions. So it will be your turn to save the world in this model. I have to introduce some policies to put them in Valencia. And
I have to share the PDF and also the model.
okay. Sorry. The model is written. So speak from here. So in this PDF, you have a list of equations. It's maybe not so friendly to look at it, but this follows more or less the nature of a white box model. So it comes from theoretical and empirical relations established in the economic view. We don't have here, it's very simplified, so we don't have agents, we don't have these households that were presented before in William. So we can say this is a matter simulation. We are assuming and including some relationships between the big macroeconomic variables, investment, consumption, debt, profits, and we are seeing how the economy behaving in this case. Of course, the GDP will be associated with some consumption of energy and materials, and this will be related to emissions and increasing the temperature. So also, it's a model that has a Keynesian nature. What do I mean by that? So we can go to the part of output production. I mean that final demand, which is composed of consumption and investment. So we are working in the framework of a closed economy. We are not considering international trade, and we are not considering also government sector. Just a simplification. It's like Snow White economy, like from yesterday. So it's a fairy tale because this does not exist in the real world, but it's something to allow us to work with in a simple way. And these two components of demand, they determine the final demand in the economy, and this is the cause of output. So when consumers want to buy, when firms want to invest, they increase sales, and then it leads to production. So output will be caused by final demand, but it is also constrained by the limit of potential output. So what's potential output? Is the maximum capacity that the economy can produce in that period. So you also have some equation that's hidden here, number 9, there's a mistake there, but it shows that potential output is a proportion of K. K is the capital stock of the economy. So if you have some questions, please interrupt. So this is one of the constraints to the growth of demand, and another one that appears here is the climate damage. So it's also considered here. So it's something that reduces the impact of final demand on GDP. Of course, there are many other ways to introduce this. This was a simpler one for us. But it's also another constraint to economic growth that appears in this model. Other possible constraints that are absent here, population. So we have employment being determined by demand here, both by demand and by labor productivity. So this is labor. LT is the demand by labor in the economy. We will have the total output is caused by final demand, and depending on the labor productivity, it will mean that firms will hire a certain number of workers. So we are assuming here that there is an unlimited availability of workers in this economy, but it would be possible to introduce the number of people, the population, and this would mean that the maximum quantity of people in the labor force will be also another limit to economic growth. Another possibility would be material resources, and also for like smaller economies, open economies in the third world, the external debt or the balance of payment constraints are also important constraints to growth in the short and in the long run. So we need to look up on how this is how people's inventing. You can also open in yours, so it's easier for if everyone looks at it's on computer. So it's a bunch of arrows, of course, but we have final demand here being determined by consumption and investments. What determines consumption and investments? We can, so consumption, this is more close to, it's a macro version, but it's close to what was explained earlier today. Consumption depends on the income. So income of people who consume comes from labor they supply, the wages they receive, but also comes from the distribution of profits that comes both for companies and from banks. And also part of the consumption comes from the wealth of people that here is in the form of deposits in the bank sector. Another source of demand is investments, and we also follow the same perspective that was presented earlier. Investment varies according to the use of capacity. So when firms are selling more, engineers can look at the firm and see, oh, we are using more capacity that we would desire to use for technical reasons. And then they say, okay, they realize we need to expand, we need to invest, we need to expand capacity, and this means an increase in investment. So this is there's a parameter here, the sensibility of the use of capacity to investment, but this is more or less the reason. So capacity utilization, we can go there. So yeah, this is related to some questions that Breeze raised before, I guess. Capacity utilization here depends on final demand delay. So I guess the other day you were talking like, okay, how come investment depends on income, and investment generates income because GDP is led by demand. So this is the point here. We are using a delay function to work with the demand, the final demand of the previous period. So we don't have this circularity because previous period is exogenous with respect to the current period. So this allows us to have this type of explanation and allows the model to work neatly. So also, as I was telling before, also capacity utilization is somewhat of a balancing loop to investment because on the one hand, investment increases capacity by increasing demand. On the other hand, since capacity means higher stock of capital, higher capital stock, it also, when this capital stock is mature to become productive, it also reduces the use of capacity because there is new capacity being used. And how come investment is financed? How investment is financed in this model? So we introduced a very simplified financial sector here. There's a banking sector that provides loans to the firms that want to invest, and also part of the investments financed out of the accumulated profits in the previous period. So I can go back to the okay. So the total quantity of loans in the current period will be given by the previous period loans plus the share of investments that are financed out of loans. So theta is this share minus epsilon loans. Epsilon is the share of loans from the previous period that were paid off. So and the equity of firms will change according to this also this equation 5. in which they are, of course, explained by previous period equity, plus the share of investments that's financed out of, say, accumulated profits, because it's increases that equity minus depreciation and the base loans. So I think this is more or less the investment function and the explanation of the banking sector. This also implies introducing banks in the equation. So banks provide loans to firms. So we have interest, banks have a profitability, of course. This comes from a spread, new, over the value of the loans. And also they pay an interest on the deposits that are held in banks. So this explains the bank profits that will also affect the consumption later. So it's maybe a bit complex, but these are more or less the main relationships that are here. The interest, there's that payment from firms to banks, related profits. Output delay is also important here. So it's a similar logic with respect to final demand delay. Output delay is used to determine the level of employment. So it appears here. We have employment. It's equal to output delay divided by lambda. Lambda is the availability of labor. So we just set a coefficient here. We can also switch to different views. If you go down there in your advancing, you have this sheet saying economy and energy and environment. So here it will appear the other view. This is another part of this system. It regards the use of materials and the use of energy in this model. So we have both sources of energy, renewable energy and non-renewable energy. This model assumes that eta is the share of renewable energy that's used in the economy. So eta will be a crucial variable to explain the evolution of emissions in the model. If you maybe a technological policy, a green growth policy would imply changing this in time and seeing how this evolves after some public investment, and how this may lead to smaller emissions and smaller temperature increase in the long run. Also, zeta is the parameter that correlates GDP, the output, with the energy demand. So it's also a very important issue. And there is this material size actually here. For simplification, it's not directly related to the emissions and to temperature increase, but could be improved. So, I don't know, do you have any questions right now? Because we can run the model and show some graphs. Are you following? Yeah. We can simulate. Sorry? I think there's okay, mine doesn't have it. So if we simulate a model, we can see, for instance, our target variable here is the temperature. So we open a graph, and we can see that in this period, in this indication of years, but we start from a temperature of something a bit above 25 degrees, and it goes to 28 degrees. So it's an increase of 3 degrees of the temperature. This will cause a climate damage that comes after, below here, and will have a further impact on the economy by reducing the impact of final demand on output. So we can also use this other graph to see what are the causes of temperature increase. Causes strip. And we will see, of course, what we know, that is the CO2 increase that's leading to the increase in the average temperature in the simulation. So how can we reduce the temperature increase? We should reduce emissions. And this can be done by introducing some policies here. So increase the use of renewable energy, reduce the impact of output of energy, but also it has been discussed here, and it's very important also to consider other policies, maybe some consumption reduction, some basic on non-renewable, or degrowth policies as working time reduction, basic income taxation. So there are many possibilities to be exploited here. I hope you are eager to do this. I mean, this is, I would like you to do as an exercise. I mean, you can introduce a policy directly, or you can introduce, as Paula was showing before, you consider a year in which the policy starts. You can change the name of the simulation here if you want to compare scenarios. So, for instance, we can change here a parameter. Let's do an arbitrary change. If I increase eta, and I change the name here, I run it again. At least in my advancing, this would lead to two different graphs. I hope the same happens here. Yeah, so we can compare two simulations. And of course, the most recent one has a lower increase in temperature. So it's the blue one has a lower temperature. In the time of the simulations, of course, I did in a very arbitrary way. I hope you can do in a more creative way. I don't know, maybe after someone can share how he found some results. Also important, if you're willing to do some degrowth policies, you may also consider to maybe perhaps introducing a different indicator like well-being, because here we have GDP and we don't have any measure of well-being. But if you're introducing degrowth, you will decrease GDP, and maybe your results would not look so nice in the sense that you reduce emissions and you also reduce the growth of GDP. Maybe you wanted to introduce a different indicator, well-being or something like that, to show that you have also positive results in this sense. So people are working less, for instance, they have a better quality of life, they can spend less time at work, so they can enjoy more and they have a greater well-being. So, hands on. I think it should be nice to do groups, yeah, so people can discuss. Yeah, 2 or 3 people, like yesterday.
Paula or Elena, maybe just comment shortly here and shortly. I try to open for I encountered something now I have various parts and use yes, we did.
Yes, there are two. Guillermo sent one, which is the one I used before.
Also, I think there is some mistake because
No, I think you should have the yes, the one I used before, but on 15.
and then
There's no other model in the model
is there some other Just one store, and then €1 in
The other is with the media version, only for the last couple of where you see the economic model, but this is for the
So my idea all these are for like here you can like so here this is like for music, then there are variables that is just the normal like in this part. So my idea would be to be able to share renewables say like over time, so in the time of 12 years,
Sí, pero en todo caso, sí, el sistema.
is the share of renewables.
Una cantidad de dinero
Model like something like rough, you know. Like so we can have here 0.5 and then we can make this a blue color. We take this away. And then we make like one of the lookup functions that is stuff 0.5. So I would try to follow it. Like first I want to know the current value is for
no, because
Bueno, no, lo de trabajar. Ya, yo creo que sí
Need to change this function.
You agree with my
If it's done, I don't know, so 200 years, then we can put it on. Oh, 3.8.
What you're saying, to limit the flow, to limit the demand, right?
Yes.
Two parts.
Because you need a variable that's
When you regulation, yes, the arrow
Basically, have time, any time.
so we have this variable. I'm going to
Yeah, time is not.
Like everyone
we should have an idea of what number is here, as a number.
like if the leader
No, I didn't know that one, but I would like to finish it.
I don't know. Yeah, I have one.
Kind of short.
It's not new.
I understood. No.
You're right. So you can say, okay, I will.
That's also the health system, what they write in the same, similar mechanism. So is the reason for regulation of the situation of subdivision and protein and so on. And you know, it's kind of quite interesting how they are social. What the father has line of the father. And also, of course, he's trying to
not like all this year.
and this is really very interesting.
And then when you say, so we have this strength that I also mentioned, like the graphic itself, the material, everything was like thinking about the system itself from the Lunga, so the biosphere and the habitat of animals, like how that's connected in each other like this. This structure itself,
This kind of self-regulation system in land is the basis of considering the heart of the couple is also a line of but maybe there's one of the problems that is the revolution.
We don't want the
So the same life also is similar.
That's interesting.
Quite imaginative.
It's an interesting concept. Like,
Quite interesting. Oh, you can say Google, of course, you can find life price in Spanish. Very nice. It's not only just a theory, but also it's just an philosophy, or just understanding that we are part of a bigger organism. We belong to these organisms, part of the regulation process.
It's a very but okay, this is correct. It's theoretical in your model, I don't think it's effective. So we have to write something out. It's still growing. So when you look at data, so I think it's more important. Just more important is to write So this is what is our based on the relationship of those blocks. Productivity and other stuff. But you can say, against the mean between the formula and other stuff. And the formula based on the materials. So, I don't know, I think. All time. You have to do like this. Maybe. It's hard.
Yeah, you write the,
Disproportional. So, but I don't know if it's working. Oh, yeah. So now, the linear is at like 4,000 divided by regions, right? And here you put the connection if you want to consider. So yeah, in for example, I can see like this because it is you have like this, and then you define the graphical variable. It would now it has then automatically assumes that what we wanted to market. So this is the given arrow, so we give the dependency with the automatic defined. So this is always the function of
pero por ejemplo, este cambio, and this change to like the economic
It's going to change the name comparison. Yeah.
We just invest in the
Maybe you have problem with the masking and you should have because it's not great the variable.
Do we have materials?
Yeah.
Oh, we have materials. Oh, okay. Material variable. But what's the economics of doing the economics of it? So normally we need the material density of okay, and then we can reduce the material density. And then we need to do the step of recycling of material.
I don't really care the materials in the mean. Okay, so the mean.
Time and
Like, I think like they have.
like a fast, we have increasing the number of variables. So digital
Smaller than final demand. Yes, sorry.
maybe when you
present how we can understand.
So we don't see
It looks like
the temperature. Maybe there is a small one.
So there's no point where
Probably you can change the I'm just I'm looking the materials
Yeah, I agree with that limitation.
when the unit they use the but you would have like when you put everything.
And we don't have a very simple dynamic model connected to
I mean, that was the original idea when I talked to Lucas. We have a license so that we do the materials model and then do a simple energy model that is also in the theory context. What you do now, you can do model of the theory here, and then they all connect. Like you build 3 groups, and everybody gets the responsibility to. So you get students from the everybody gets the responsibility to build like one model, one material, one interval, and then in the end, because they have like the locomotion experience. They have to have meetings, and they even hold they have they meet this is Rupi actually running through yeah, same here. Materials stuff is very important, so you So when you're releasing material, then you will have a problem. How is the temperature?
It's bigger body. You know, it's like the one that was down, the second one, eliminated by half.
So these are one degree. Now this topic is minus.
Okay, so this is the by half.
But now I want to use standard point. Now I want to use like a here.
I can introduce this topic not for mine. Here in this version, yesterday is where we exercise when we have now I will just compare material demand is going up.
That's
No, I know. What's happening is like material demand is going up, and then the brand materials, and then it's going minus because we don't define that. But it's not possible. I mean, instead I
And you did find the variable that's a lot like
because the idea is just like you say, let's say if you want to back, so you can go plus one new. But if you only get a box of beer,
so here we create a brand, so it is
well, indeed, the qualifications are okay to never achieve zero. It's not no sense. I mean, the equation is okay to meet the physical sense. So you need to be aware of that.
You want to eliminate.
I don't know how to model. Yeah, of course, I have to model in a good way in order to not get the value. So when you reach a negative value, this is like an alarm to say, maybe something is wrong. Yeah, but
I mean, it's pretty much the simplification of the problem that we have in taking that simplicity demand from the other, and then we will have also it's not the usual way to do that, because usually one is for example, a flow is just say 1%. So usually the flow should depend on the stock. In the case of materials, it's the same. How much copper is taken from mine? A portion, one part of the copper you have in mine. Yeah, that's how it's more. No, that's how it's more. But you could also like I mean, when you want the extraction capacity, so we have like then that much wells, but then you have the number of production capacity that you modeled. And that's entering in the flow. That's not
This production capacity should have
it does. And then it does, but in this example now, or when we have the dependency of the market, we don't have that, then you have to force the flow. You have to write something else.
So medicine that is negative positive, so
okay, and there's no other function than min-max and anything else. Is there no
yes, of course.
By default,
interesting.
Yes, but also it's a kind of alarm to check if you are modeling in the right way.
yeah, of course, but I mean, sometimes there is no, I doesn't care, like, about the market, on the market. So what we have on the market, we have like processes over some time and price and so on. But if we say now, like, tomorrow we decide to double the amount of the electronic vehicles, the demand will come, no matter of the availability or whatever. So then I just request the market in the management there is not a dependency, it's not a percentage of availability. But in this case, I know also, so the standard price, and then I was like, oh, what's the difference? Because instead of the stock as mine was then they put my now I decided I just wanted to know
the convention a bit of in the flow is a share of the stock. For some things, including more value, there are other things, for instance, with the fisheries, that doesn't work, it doesn't work that way. So you can exhaust completely the stock. But if you put a share, you are not going to exhaust the stock.
The usual way,
Yeah.
usual way that share of the stock cannot be that's why it's the usual way, but I recognize that. Yes, no,
I would prefer to put that if it is much negative than it is if you do yes. I have to do that constraint.
No, we have it. We have it. It was just a question, I was wondering if there's another simpler way to do it, or if there's maybe like, I don't know, like maybe in the equation setting, you can just set it like this is not a point, because when I think about it, it's just a lot of energy. I mean, it makes sense because then I think the main thing is that you need the connection, but it's just a lot of energy that I would say.
Maybe you can, I never use it, but in the editor, equation editor, you have an option to choose min and max value for stock, so maybe you can write it down. I never use it, but maybe you can try. If you choose a new stock, you have here min and zero, so maybe you can choose that, but it's saying that if you write a
I used to I increased the material density by 3, so it's the opposite way. How to destroy the plant. This
No, the one with
so this is similar. Yes, it's just because we take more than the material available in the stores. So we have to do is very much more it's not our I didn't build this, so I don't know. It's just something that I was wondering. Yes, maybe this and there we have also the thing that we like run out of capital and then we can hire someone. What's the so yeah, maybe
when you write min max, a warning about the variable is over with 9 0. So it's just only for warning. So just warning. No function that you can write by yourself. But it is only for warning.
I have passed over. I don't know.
I never used
But I really want to do the other one also there. It's always interesting to know these
¿Dónde podía entrar? A ver, no, está relacionado con el consumo y con lo que sale. Estos son los usos de la aplicación. Luego voy a es el, o sea, tú consumes más, esta es la proporción marginal a consumir en el auto web.
Sí, porque
eso los 3,05 lo compensa con el resultado.
一种是直接改牌坊，就是他们让我们用改牌坊的买然后来消费了。
O sea, no estaba eso, lo más como yo que no sé
Ahora, por ejemplo, lo que he hecho es cambiar la conversión. Lo consumimos menos y ya está. Entonces sería la
咱们
No, no, tío, si no decís nada,
Sí, pero eso, lo que está haciendo es que tiene un efecto directo en el consumo.
sí. Lo que consumes aquí.
So maybe Sarah can explain what she
Yes.
and
Okay, so we said that what we said is that we can we can restrict the material demand, like that kind of thing. So we put it a limit in the 4,000.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, in Vector we use like the function max with the. So we put in a limitation, introducing a variable that was limitation. That it was like a constant with the value 4,000. And then in the material demand, that is like absolute, we put it the demand and the function that was already, y, and our limitation. Right? Yes, it was me. So these ended up like in the graph in ended up like this. And thanks to this, we were able to lower the CO2 emissions. Should I say about like the other?
you also changed the potential.
The potential output. Okay, so that was the first part we did, and then like as it was not really linked in the model, we had to modify the potential output we will have. So in order to do that, we did another. So in the economic view, we had like the potential output, and we put the restriction there too. Because in the PDF, it was said that the demand of energy was equal to delta multiplied for the output. So we just put this here and said that the output is equal to the demand energy divided by sigma. Okay, so we took this, this is being the limitation, and we introduced it in the potential output with a function of mean again, because we love that kind of function. And so x, y, like the function that was before, and then in the other place, we put it the demand of energy divided by sigma. So this ended up in a reduction of CO2 emissions, not by a lot, but like kind of by a good amount, and a reduction of temperature by like 2 degrees, 3 degrees more or less, and yeah, obviously the reduction of demand energy, focusing on a kind of a reduction in everything. If you want to see the example on the graphs in deeply, you have them here. I hope I've explained myself good.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anyone else wants to share what she or he did. So guys, thank you very much. I mean, this was more or less the purpose of the hands-on section. If you want to keep having a look, feel free to talk to me on the next days. I don't know if Paula or Iñaki want to.
Paula and Iñaki,
to close
since game is finished, do you want to wrap up something, say something, or?
The only thing is that in case you have any question or whatever, any suggestion, you have our emails to the presentation that we will distribute. Feel free to contact us. One is going to stay here the whole week this week. Also Manu as well. He already knows the moment. So you can be present.
Thank you so much. No, thank you.